Good evening. My name is Christoph Bläsi, and I'm talking to you as a member of a 9-person strong committee which has masterminded, initiated and implemented this. A warm welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. In particular, I would like to welcome Mr. Garrett Hulse, a leading diplomat from the Embassy of New Zealand to Germany in Berlin, Professor Dr. Stephan Jolie, the Vice President of Johannes Gutenberg University, and of course Witi Ihimaera, the world author and ambassador of indigenous literature from New Zealand. This evening is the concluding highlight of our lecture series, The Whalerider, an exploration of New Zealand through Witi Ihimaera's novel, which in turn has been the backbone of the series of events in the course of this semester under the heading The Whalerider by Witi Ihimaera, Nature, Myth, Culture of Our Antipodes. This series of events, a big read, as Eine Uni, ein Buch, high events are called the Anglo-Saxon sphere, had thankfully been sorted für die Deutsche Wissenschaft, Klaus Tschira Stiftung and Zeit Verlag. We can add that we have gained this money competitively. It was not just thrown at us. Not least to promote this, we had engaged quite a bit of quintessential storytelling. The stories why we had chosen a book from New Zealand of all places have been told occasionally in the course of the last weeks. To keep it very short, to get out of the dampening effects of the confinement measures during the pandemic was one reason. That the book was very accessible to a wide range of audiences and that it belongs to the category of post-colonial indigenous literature certainly helped. During the current summer semester, which will draw to a close in the week after next, there were events like a reading night, artistic workshops that took the Whalerider as a theme. We have opened a digital communication installation with New Zealand just a few days ago, and we had this lecture series in which distinguished colleagues from Germany, New Zealand and other places have shared their thoughts about the Whalerider and the topics addressed in it, like the culture and language of the Maori, Maori myths, legal issues from post-colonial perspective, whales, but also whales covered in literature in a broader perspective, but also the production and reception history of the Whalerider from a publishing studies perspective, and e.g., last week, how sea animals as well as humans are endangered by microplastics. We have also screened the film based on the novel, and now, as the undisputable highlight, the author of the novel, Witi Ihimaera, is our guest. Welcome again, Witi. Being grateful about a safe trip is more than an empty topos when we talk about more than 18,000 kilometers. Before Witi Ihimaera will be introduced by my colleague Mita Banerjee, and Witi Ihimaera will talk and read, we are happy that we can start this evening with welcoming addresses by Stephan Jolie, the Vice President of our university, and by Garrett Hulse, a diplomat from New Zealand Embassy to Germany. And then I would ask you, Mr. Vice President, to give your address.
So I promise I will keep it short and simple. Dear sir or madam, dear guests, it's a really special pleasure for me, and it's a great honor to welcome you to this evening, here in our Old Mensa, let's say the good parlor of our university, on behalf of the presidential board of Johannes Gutenberg University. The president himself would have really liked to be here this evening. He has to go to Berlin to his duties and so on. So it's me as vice president to say hello to you all. And I would like to extend a special greeting, of course, to the second secretary of the New Zealand embassy in Berlin, Garrett, Hulse, and of course to our guest of honor and our today's speaker and the hero of our semester, let's say, to Witi Ihimaera. Ihimaera. So, having already had the pleasure to welcoming you in front of our School of Music on Monday, I'm happy to be with you again at the, let's say, the highlight of your visit to most of what this is the highlight here. It's an honor and pleasure for us to have you here as our guest, to know that you are associated with our university, and let's say you're part of our
continent. I was just talking to the vice.
The new waka, and when it was far from land and nobody on shore could see his plan, he opened the hole and the sea came up into the canoe and it began to sink. As his brothers were laughing in that shining sea, he swam among them, killing them one by one with a sharp club, staining the water with their blood. Only one more prince to go, Paikea. But at that moment, a giant tattooed whale surfaced. The sea split apart. The waves pushed Paikea away from his brother. He caught hold of one of the whale's pectoral fins, and it pulled him from the scene of the royal assassinations. Wasn't he a lucky boy? However, the whale was on its migratory odyssey from French Polynesia to Antarctica. And so, instead of taking Paikea back to Raiatea, his home, it took him forward to a surprising new destination, because surprising new destinations always lie forward in the future. It took him to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and after many days and nights, it delivered Paikea to that new destiny. In Aotearoa, he went walking, and of course, when you go walking in New Zealand, you're bound to meet a beautiful girl. And he met Huturangi, who became his wife. And from their union springs the people of the East Coast that I have referred to earlier. And I am very, very proud to be among those descendants. Well, I was in New York in 1986, working as a New Zealand diplomat just like Garrett, when I wrote the novel The Whalerider. But that's another story. But it was not sufficient for me to just repeat the ancient myth. In my case, my contemporary Whalerider wasn't a young prince called Paikea, but a young girl called Kahutia Te Rangi, and she was living in the modern rather than ancient world, where the leadership qualities of women within a patriarchal environment were yet to be recognised. So in many ways, even contemporaneously in 1986, that ancient world of patriarchy still existed. When she rides the whale, of course, she becomes Moby Chick. In my novel, Paikea, the original prince, has of course died a long time ago, but the conceit of the novel is that the original whale, who is 10 centuries old by now, still lives on. He arrives in Whangarā in the 1980s and beaches himself. The villagers are faced with existential questions. Is the whale real or unreal? Is this event natural or supernatural? What is the ancient whale's purpose in living for so long? Well, one of the purposes is to ensure Kahutia Te Rangi's succession to tribal leadership and to affirm the role of women within a new and changing environment. But the other is just as important. It is to remind the tribe of the kinship between humankind and whalekind, of tangata with the Mr. Seti whale species, of the urgency that attends climate change, as well as the environment. For just as the Anthropocene age appears to witness humankind hell-bound on our extinction, so does it seem we are hell-bent on taking all other animal and other plant species with us, including the whales. In the book, in 1986, the old whale arrives to tell us, don't. Thus, there are two journeys and two destinations and two destinies threaded through the Whalerider, the human and the cetacean. And they came about through a whole set of circumstances that surrounded my writing of the book when I arrived in New York. For instance, it coincided with a dramatic event, and I'm sure that some of you here are almost as old as I am, so you will recall that circumstance, and that was the cloud of nuclear waste making its way down the Atlantic coast following the Chernobyl nuclear disaster on 26 April 1986. I wrote the book 2 months later. Another circumstance was my job. I had arrived to safeguard New Zealand's relationship with the United States because of our nuclear-free policy. So a nuclear-free Pacific was very much on my mind when I was writing The Whalerider, and in fact, New Zealand at that time was negotiating with Pacific nations a nuclear territorial land, sea, and airspace free zone, which was implemented the next year, 1987. At the same time, because Antarctica is a site, one of the locations in the Whalerider, the Antarctic Treaty, of which New Zealand was one of 12 countries, was much under consideration at the United Nations. And as you know, most of the world's fresh water is still sourced from Antarctica. Saving cetacean whales species was also on my mind at the time. The International Whaling Commission met constantly during the 1980s to seek agreement for a moratorium on commercial whale hunting. Iceland, Norway, and Japan objected, and Japan still hunts whales for so-called research purposes. And because of my understanding about whales, when the book came out, the South Pacific Whaling Research Commission asked me to join them, and I became known as Witi Ihimaera, Prince of Whales. There was another threat on the horizon. The Soviet Union had begun harvesting huge amounts of krill in Antarctic waters, thereby affecting the food supplies for migratory species to Antarctica. The Te Māori exhibition of Māori artifacts began in Los Angeles in the early 1980s and was touring San Francisco, St. Louis, New York, and Chicago, so Indigenous sovereignty was also rising in my mind in 1986. A whale came down the Hudson River, an unbelievable and such a stupid thing for a whale to do, because that river was so black and so dirty and so unhealthy. It would have died, well, I would have died on the spot if I had even dived into it. And then, of course, my two darling daughters, Olivia and Jessica, came for vacation in New York, and we went to see Star Wars, and Jessica said to me, "Why is it, Daddy, that all of the heroes in these movies are boys? Why can't girls save the world?" So Jessica is the girl who rides the whale, and instead of riding out to space, she rides a whale undersea to Antarctica to save her tribe. So you could say that there was a confluence of factors that bloody well hijacked me on my way to the office every day, and which then made me write this book. Well, as they say, things are always darkest before they become totally black. But I grabbed all those inspirations out of the air, and in a state of spontaneous combustion, the novel was written. I told people it was written in 3 months, but it was actually written in 6 weeks, which was the amount of time that Jessica and Olivia had for me in vacation, to come on vacation. Ko Witi Ihimaera, tēnei. I am Witi Ihimaera. Ka nui te honore, ko homai ki au. The Māori people say that before you set forth on a journey, you must be sure to know your stars. Me mātou I whetū, I mua I te kōkiri o te haere. And tonight I have followed that star path from Aotearoa to Germany. They have led me forward to Mainz, those very stars of Matariki that Garrett has mentioned. And so I begin again this kōrero, this time directly addressing you and your own journeys into the futures that await you. I pay my tribute to the whenua and iwi of the Rhineland Palatinate. That is your place of departure on your journeys into the future. And I am so humbled that Gutenberg University chose the Whalerider as the book for the Big Read 2023. I thank Professor Dr. Stephan Jolie, Vice President for Studies and Teaching, Professor Dr. Christoph Blasey for his incredible organisational acumen, and for many Gutenberg University colleagues who have now become friends, hoa otaku ngākau, including Anke Vogel, Julia Sander, Kirsten Reuter, Birger Peterson, Angela Curling, Meta Banerjee, who I met many years ago in Toronto, Canada. I was an old and ancient navigator then, and she is still a very young and beautiful lady now. And my warm greetings to Svenja Volkel and her son Tim, who I met in Auckland prior to travelling to Germany. I want to pay my respects to the rangatira tohunga, your kaumātua, Johannes Gutenberg. Māori took up his letterpress printing technology very quickly during the early years of colonisation in the 19th century as an act of decolonisation by printing in the te reo language, not in English, the Māori language pamphlets, newspapers, handbills, tracts, posters, you name it, on their own printing presses, their notices of land alienations and cultural dispossession, so that the iwi Māori would never forget. So their work went into the memory and through those presses. And in fact, Māori were among the first Indigenous peoples in the world to publish the Bible in te reo, the Māori language. All of those particular pamphlets became the alternative discourse to the main Pākehā discourse my ancestors wrote against. And all that me and my contemporary colleagues in Aotearoa are doing today is only the continuation of this whakapapa, this genealogy. Nā reira, e te rangatira tohunga, e te whare wānanga mauria mai tō ingoa āreki. Kia ora koutou tupuna, greetings to your ancestors. They are as the stars of heaven. Rātou, koutou, tātou, ngā rangatira mā, koe mā, koro mā, iwi mā, greetings. And now I turn, huri noa ahau, ki te hunga ora, ki a koutou tonight. This year, I celebrate my 50th anniversary as a novelist. My father would be laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing with hysteria. He would tell you, Witi, it took him 9 years to get through university, and with only C- averages. My father sent me a telegram in those days that it said, "Congratulations, about time." But even the tortoise didn't take this long. I have learned a lot about life, about love and the whole universe, and I know that I am able to write much better than I currently do. I'm always aiming for excellence. So look to the future in 5 years' time, when I will, in fact, have produced my magnum opus, the very best work that I will have ever been able to achieve in a lifetime spent trying hard to prove to my father that I'd done good. I own my role. I own it now as a Māori writer, a Pacific writer, and an Indigenous writer. A special mention on my Indigenous responsibility. There are estimated to be 476 million Indigenous iwi in the world, including Māori, which is about 6% of the global population. There are people such as the Wari in the Amazon rainforest or the Rohingya in Myanmar who are facing genocide. Man's inhumanity to man is one thing, but man's inhumanity to Indigenous man, woman and child is another, and they must be our special responsibility, and they certainly always are on my conscience. Turning back to the topic, I mentioned earlier that in all my work, I create new myths out of old to give them new currency. And it won't surprise you to know that when I first started to write It was dreadful. I was 10 years of age. I was in Miss Hossack's class at primary school, and I was really wanting to go out and play footy with my mates, rugby, and she forced us all to write a story. So mine goes, once upon a time, there was a princess locked in a tall tower, guarded by a fierce dragon, and she would see a handsome prince ride by on his white horse, and she would go to the window and yell, help me, save me from this dragon. But because she was so ugly, the princes on their white horses would keep on riding further and further down the road to rescue a more beautiful princess. Day after day this would happen until the princess got so sick and tired of waiting that she went out and married the dragon. Well, some people would say that my work has not improved. But there are some interesting messages happening there, and that is that already I was trying to confound expectations. The princess is not beautiful like she's supposed to be. The princes are not chivalrous like they're supposed to be. She's in a tall tower which represents white power. And of course, when she marries the dragon, she embraces her own self, the land of danger, and a more dangerous destination. And then on a personal level, it's also a story about young women who should never wait around for their handsome prince to come, because he never does arrive. I mentioned earlier that in all my work, I recreate new myths out of old to give them new currency, as you are all doing here in Mainz, rewriting your history out of the social, geographical, and historical texts, contexts, pretexts, subtexts, intertexts, and textualities of the Rhineland Palatinate. Over the past few days, I have been asking questions about Mainz, mainly, who are the real people of Mainz? Who are the real people of this city? Who are the thinkers among you who will ensure that the public record of your history is not overwritten by those who currently oversee your future, in the same way that Māori history was overwritten by those who were overseeing our future in the 19th and 20th centuries? Well, sir, I've been really impressed by the qualities of the answers I have been given in scholarly halls like your university and in coffee bars. The vigour, the clear concern, the passion, the astute thinking. It all reminds me of what our own younger generation in Aotearoa are articulating as we face the future hanging on the horizon. That future has been shaped into new structures by world events, including, of course, the main driver for us who live in the Pacific, environmental survival. I want to let you know that New Zealand is a party to the COP Convention, which we signed in 1992, which provides a structure for negotiating climate change agreements. We're gearing up to become what Māori call kaitiaki, humanitarian, with a holistic approach to maintaining the Pacific environment. So we're looking after our part of the world, and we expect you to look after yours on all our behalves. 450,000 Pacifica people now live in New Zealand, comprising 30 distinct Pacific groups, and you might liken them to your own immigrant groups who are living here in Germany. So we are not dissimilar because we are Antipodean, and you are, what are you, Podean here on this side of the globe. They are a Pacific diaspora, in our case, making more visible through their pain and tears the dilemmas of island nation kinship, generational trauma and loss from the increasing number of catastrophic climate events which have decimated islands and island ecosystems. Tidal waves, earthquakes, rising sea levels, coastal erosion, flooding, tsunamis, loss of corals, global emissions. That was already there when I was writing The Whalerider in 1986, but it was not as pronounced as now, and so I grieve very much because of that. We know that we must have a plan for resettlement of Pacific Islanders in New Zealand, as much as you need a resettlement plan here in Germany for your new populations. The crisis is inevitable. We know that. We're preparing for climate-induced displacement. At the front line is the small island nation of Tuvalu, which is predicted to disappear forever under the waves by 2050. And so we are battling against time in the Pacific to ensure that all peoples have the sovereign right of a place to go to. Well, the interesting thing is that Tuvalu is pivoting online. As their land disappears, they have no choice but to become the world's first digital nation, with their land, ocean, and culture, the most precious assets of their people, being moved to the cloud. They're moving everything to the cloud, just as we are moving our memory into writing. Climate change has become a non-traditional security concern. Every New Zealander is part of the conversation, and we have been led actually by all of the young school students from here in Germany to take up that same rako, or that same position. New Zealand children are involved through School Strike for Climate. They know it is important to tell their tale, or someone else will or won't. As a country of thinkers like yours, we're trying to find technological and communication solutions through proactive, critical conversations in geosciences, terrestrial and marine research, or in metaverses, new frontiers in cyberspace for digital communication platforms to meet local, global, and global needs. And I was amazed to walk around this city and to realize that here is developing a crucial relationship with biomed and with other biotech companies, which will offer worldwide solutions in medical diagnostics. How amazing that that's coming out of this city. And through the growing relationship of Pākehā with Māori, we are becoming more aware of the relationship between seen and unseen worlds. Seen worlds and unseen worlds. What is the world that we see? The physical world. But what is the world that we don't see? All of that dynamic of the world that is destroyed when the physical constructions of the world is destroyed. Māori understand very well the metaphysical, the spiritual, the invisible structures that also disappear when everything else disappears. And that may very well become the main asset that we can offer from our part of the globe as we all try to go back to basic humanitarian concepts. Because in the invisible are principles like tapu, the sacredness of things, mana, their strength, their royal nature, mauri, their essence, tika, their truth, pono, their honesty, and aroha, their overwhelming love of creatures for us, of us for humanity, of humanity for the natural world, of rangi nui above and papatuanuku below, so that we can all preserve the holistic space between that we live in. And that really is, ladies and gentlemen, what Whalerider's message is all about. Preserving the invisible, not just the visible. Looking at the world in terms of whether it is seen or unseen, real or unreal. And we know that the unreal has as much potency in protecting all of us as the real. In the meantime, look at us. I'm glad that we all survive. We're still all here as a species. We can still hold to hands together. The next question, though, is how will we thrive in the survive of survival? This morning, a young, beautiful young German girl spoke to us on the train and said, and I asked her who she was, and she said, I am a Mensa Mädchen. But what did she mean, I wondered? What Mainz was she referring to? And I thought about her eagerness to obtain learning and to go out into the world, and then I took a workshop in Kirsten Reuter's writing class in the Georg Forsterbau, and I thought again, how like young thinkers everywhere, all young people are, to have such hopes and to have such dreams, but how will they survive What can we offer them in terms of safety so that their careers can continue healthily, safely, and with a particular destination or destiny that we can offer them at the end? Not hopelessness, not homelessness, and not a future without jobs. How can we ensure their strong leadership? Who among them will speak for their generation? Because they are, after all, the future. After today, Mr. Vice President, I have every confidence in them to rise to all the challenges that await them. Kia kaha, kia manawa nui koutou tamariki. I say this to the young people in the audience. Become your own paikea. Become your own kahutia te rangi. Always remember that when paikea landed in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that was not an ending. It was only another beginning for the saga of the human odyssey, which must go on and 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 on. It must go on and on. Whakarongo ake au, ki te tangi a te manu nei, a te mā tui, tui a. Tui ai ronga, tui ai raro, tui ai roto, tui ai waho. Tui e te here tangata, ka rongo te ao, ka rongo te pō. Tui e te kāwai tangata, I heke mai Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pāma mao, ki te hono I wairua, ki te paia ki te ao marama. Listen to the voices of the past. They are calling us all to unite in humankind, unite with the skies above, the earth below, the sea surrounding, the rivers that replenish us. Join together all our descent lines from the past to all the lines of genealogy we possess and twine them fast as we go on into the future. You have your own truth, write it. You have your own truth, talk it. You have your own truth, walk it. I ngā rangatira mā, the future is here, the future is now. We all have to react faster, learn quicker, go further. As famed futurist Ray Kurzweil has said, our intuition about the future is linear, but the reality of information technology is exponential, and that makes a profound difference. If I take 30 steps linearly, I will only get to 30. If I take 30 steps exponentially, I will get to 1 billion. I've been truly honoured tonight to have been in the midst of exponential thinkers, talkers, and walkers. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapapaunamu te moana, kia tere te kārohi-rohi, I mua I tau huarahi. May the calm be widespread. May the ocean glisten as greenstone, and may the shimmer of sunlight ever dance across your pathway. Tēnā kouta, tēnā kouta, tēnā tātou katoa. Po kare kare ana, nā wai o wai a pu, peti atu koe hine, nā ringa ana e hine, hoki mai rā, ka mate aho, ki te aroha e.
Thank you so much, and well, now the reading.
Okay. Yeah, I've been working hard since I've been here. Okay. Well, this is going to be a very special surprise. So I've got a microphone on, so I'm sure that you can hear me all the way to the back. I'm going to be reviewing a sequel to my novel, Whalerider. It is called Metura'a, Methuselah, and it is about the very ancient whale that Kahu, in the original book, rowed back out to sea to symbolically save her tribe and also convince her grandfather that she, despite being a girl, could assume leadership. Metura'a, in the new novel, is expected to come out in 2023 or 2024. I write my novels in advance, so the novel for next year is already written and is being printed. The novel for the year following has been written, and so the editors are working on it. And so this one will come out in 2025 or 2026. It's based on that premise that I mentioned earlier, that the ancient whale is still alive and living today, and he's over 1,000 years old now. I'm going to be 1,000 years old one day. I think he's a metaphor for me. He is the living embodiment of the ancient contract from the beginning of time between the two gods of humankind and the ocean, Tāne and Tangaroa, of our connectedness, one species to the other. And at the beginning of the novel, Metura'a is feeding with his whale herd in Antarctica, but he is ailing. Will he be able to make the epic journey back from the Antarctic summer to the waters of the warm Pacific? 3 Māori waka, or canoes, are dispatched to the Antarctic to help him. And on board one of them is Kahu, the leader of the expedition. And she is the same Kahu of the original Whalerider, except that she's now a grandmother. She has brought with her her grandson Wiremu. Will they be in time, or will this year be the year when Metura'a finally dies? 2 sequences. First, a glimpse of Metura'a. Ui a mai koe a whakahua ti a ke kōwai te whare nei e ko te kani kōwai te teko teko kei runga ko pai kea, ko pai kea. And then Metura'a, the pod's ancient leader, appeared, and the ice cracked, moaned, shivered, and susurrated with rippling glissandi, a giant organ playing a titanic symphony. He came to evidence the age when gods had once communed among the Leviathans, when Ta'aroa, Lord of the sea, had created great creatures, real and unreal. Rumbling out of the eye of time, he was a whale of extraordinary appearance. To see him was to tremble because he was over 10 centuries old. No other creature in the world had lived as long. When you were in the presence of Metura'a, you were privy to the extraordinary, the unbelievable, the incredible. 40 meters long and weighing over 120 tons, Metura'a was also double the length and weight of any other whale, living or dead. Already marked out by his immense size as a giant among giants, he was also distinguished by his breathtaking markings. For during the time of early humankind, great artists had tattooed him from his nose to his giant caudal flukes. They had inscribed him with moko, emblems of his mana, whorls, chevrons, double and triple twists, spirals, and other ancient figurations. What was the purpose? Why? To embody in him Ta'aroa incarnate. This was how humankind thought their God should look like, otherworldly, supernatural, as well as natural. And over the years, the deep etched markings had gained further dramatic power and charisma by having been thickened by 10 centuries. his skin gnarled and covered in ancient bruises and discolorations. His left side was slashed with huge wounds from fights with other bull whales and sharks, and everywhere else were the cuts of propellers of 1,000 whaling ships and the pockmarks from 1,000,000 harpoons hurled at him. Over the centuries, humankind had tried to hunt him down, and he had truly earned his symbols of Ari status. No other beast had faced such travail from the ravages and assaults of his world. But Metura'a was arthritic now, moving slower. As the pod's kaumatua, he no longer possessed the flexibility to maneuver at speed. Half blind, he sometimes needed guidance, a nudge here, a delicate shove there to keep him on track. Oops, sorry, Kuro. In his old age, he sometimes had to be guided to his food, positioned in the middle of the krill eating field, where all he had to do was open his mouth and swallow. How could such a mammal like Metura'a confound time and still be living? Even he would not be able to tell you, only perhaps to reply that this was what Ta'aroa had commanded him, and as the god had commanded, so had he obeyed. O pio I mua I te arehi, bowed down to the great chieftain. The second glance, Kahu the grandmother and her quest. Once Metura'a had helped her, now it was time for her to help him. Kokiri kokiri kokiri, kokiri kokiri kokiri, kokiri kokiri kokiri, kokiri kokiri kokiri. Piri naki, piri naki, piri naki, piri naki. Hapai ngato Māori tanga e. Kokiri kokiri kokiri, kokiri kokiri kokiri. Kokiri kokiri kokiri, kokiri kokiri kokiri. And they were 3 canoes, 3 waka, only days away from their destination. Kahu looked at her grandson, Wiremu, and the girl who had come with them, Mareva. What had she done to bring these 2 young adolescents on such a perilous journey? Well, my eyes are heavy, she said to Wiremu. Don't stay up too long, a busy day tomorrow. Really, she should keep an eye on him and Mareva. But what could 2 young teenagers get up to on a small waka like theirs? Well, nothing actually. However, Wiremu was already planning a move as Kahu left. But Mareva was occupied in another thought. Your grandmother is up to something. Like what? Wiremu asked, moving closer for the kiss. When plotting our coordinates tonight, she told me not to lay our path on Sigma Octantis, which is the pillar star for the South Celestial Pole, but to aim the fleet to the west of its pointer arm. Oh well, no good trying to second guess the boss. She will have her reasons. At that moment, the heavens were suddenly illuminated by a shower of streaking falling stars. It looked so beautiful, and one of them flamed as it fell earthbound. Thinking this was his chance, Wiremu went in for the kiss. But Mareva moved away from him. Wrong, romantic moment, she said to him. That was just one of the many satellites orbiting the Earth. Chinese, Russian, American, who knows, all spying on each other. The sky is filled with as much junk as the ocean. And do you want our first kiss to be associated with rubbish? She asked. Try again tomorrow. And then tomorrow came with the hourglass dolphins that had been escorting the 3 waka, flipping and dancing with excitement. And Wiremu realised why his grandmother had ordered the fleet to sail west of Sigma Octantis. From the very beginning, she had plotted the course that would enable them to intersect with what was known as the Humpback Highway, the traditional long-established route for whales returning from Antarctica to Oceania. Oh, if only one could live more than once to see such a sight. The surface of the sea was lumpy with the sliding shapes of hundreds of tohora, sperm, humpback, southern right, rorqual, beaked, killer, and sei, huge long shapes and curving. The air above the highway drifted with puffs of spray as first the crowns of heads and the convex dimpled orifices of blowholes appeared. Then the lengths of the backs curved up and over to the erect triangular dorsal fins far down the bodies near the tail. Karanga aho kia koutonga Mr. Seti, Kahu cried. She turned to Wedamui and Marewa. Just imagine, let us only just imagine what the highway must have looked like in the old days. More birds in the sky, more marine creatures in the sea, more vivacity in the natural world, so much singing and joy in the hemispheres of the world. The whales were other nations as numerous as human tribes. The birds had their own many iwi. They were tuakana to us, our elders. The whales would help our travelling waka by shepherding them down from Oceania to Aotearoa. Her words then turned haunted and sad. And now, only these. Kokiri, 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 kokiri. Kokiri, 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 kokiri. Piri naki, piri naki, piri naki, piri naki. Hapai ni ato Māori tana e.
So I'm very sorry, he really has to work hard for his money. Does he get any money? I don't remember. Dear Witi, thank you very much for your words, for your reading. I think you did it again, you enchanted the whole room. Maybe they will wake up from their spell and have some questions for you. Is there anybody who has a question? Or just some warm words from the heart? Anke is bringing you the microphone if you have any. Okay. It's a bit weird. I can't see you, Witi. There's this massive tree. Okay. Mita.
I've been profoundly fortunate to meet so many other Indigenous and Native writers around the world, and whenever we meet, all we talk about is the situation that the world is in and the dilemma of trying to articulate what we feel and how we feel, either if we're architects or if we're artists or if we are writers. It doesn't matter what the art form is, as long as we kōrero, kōrero, kōrero. We talk, because in talking we find ourselves in unity. And there was one particular person whom I grew to respect extremely, and his name was Douglas Cardinal. And he said to me that when you start writing a piece of work, it begins to exist in the future. So whenever I write anything, I think, oh, this is just going to be easy because it's already existing in the future. So all I have to do is join the dots between here and there. Well, it doesn't, of course, end out to be as easy as that. But clearly that's not the answer to your question. But perhaps I could just hear it a little more. I didn't quite... Good. Well, here we are. Yeah.
It is on. Is that better?
Yes, that's much better. Yeah.
I was wondering how sort of, the title of your memoir, Native Son.
Yes, Native Son. Yes.
Richard writes Native Son and African American writers. Other than indigenous writers, have you also been in conversation with other minority writers?
Oh, good, good. Yes, so I did actually answer the question. But yes, everywhere where I go, I love to have conversations. But actually not the kind of conversations always with my peers. Like today, for instance, I spent most of my time talking with young people of Mainz, because it's their future that I'm interested in, just as I'm interested in the future of my grandchildren, because the world that they're going to be living in is going to be quite a world that's full of challenges. And so our role as elders has to be to make sure that that world is as safe as possible for them to meet those challenges.
Okay, we have a question.
So you wrote the Whalerider in the 1980s. Now we're in 2023. Do you think that since the 80s that a lot has improved since then? And what do you think needs to be done for Māoris and for other Indigenous people to get more respect and to just improve?
Yes. So we're all on a journey in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Garrett has referred to some of those challenges that we had in history. But what is really incredible today is, for instance, that the Governor-General is Māori and a woman. That the Minister for Foreign Affairs, who is our minister, is Māori and a woman, and she also has a kauai moko, or a moko on her chin. The Mayor of Wellington is a woman and Māori. The mayors of 8 other mayoralties in New Zealand are Māori. There are more Pākehā in New Zealand who are learning the Māori language than there are Māori. I myself am going back to school next year to learn Māori. The reason is that I felt that after having written, as you say, 14 novels, 6 collections of short stories, over 30 non-fiction works, 6 operas, 3, all of that. They were all written in English, and I want, before the end of my life, to write one in my own Māori language. And so I need to understand the grammar in a way that will allow me to do that. My daughter has married Jeffrey, who has blue eyes like you. My granddaughter has blue eyes and is blonde. So in a speech I gave last week, I said to everybody, surely the time has come when we no longer refer to our families according to the binary of Pākehā and Māori. And we have fast come to that point where all of the issues of the past are being resolved. The current governments have been absolutely fantastic in creating for us, Māori, the opportunity to get our land back. So the Waitangi Tribunal has been the government's instrument to do that. And at every time there is a land settlement, there is always an apology for past wrongs. So we're in a good place at the moment. We are really in a good place to go on. So I did give the speech last week 2 weeks ago in New Zealand, and I said that perhaps we now have a new experiment. The first experiment was we have a new project. We have in New Zealand been motivated by the Māori European project. Today we are motivated by a more futures project. What is hanging in the future just on the horizon for all New Zealanders? And that seems to be becoming what we're turning to, and away from all of the agonies of the past will still be there. There will still be problems with the number of Māori women who are incarcerated. There will still be problems with the number of Māori who do not have access to homes, and there will still be problems to do with structural racism and institutionalized racism. But we are at a point where we can now go on to the new project, which is now that we are Muslim in Aotearoa, now that we are Pacifica in Aotearoa, now that we are a Polynesian in Aotearoa, now that we are African in Aotearoa, that with this new peoples, that we should now begin to think just what future do we want, an inclusive future for all of us.
So this is a follow-up question. Continue, please.
It's interesting that you have answered my questions and you answered. But I did think, you know, I'm a New Zealander, right? I'm a fifth generation New Zealander, and I feel that possibly I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to be Indigenous? But more, I'm going to modify the question now, because you kind of say, hey, it's cool, anyone who's from New Zealand is part of this culture, and our culture is becoming more integrated between the Māori and the Pakeha, etc. What does it mean to be a New Zealander to you?
Well, I'll answer that first question, what does it mean to be Indigenous, I think. And my answer to that is that Māori are an Indigenous race. You know, we are tangata whenua. And I decided to claim my indigeneity, my identity, because there are many other writers who write for the white page. There are many other writers, black writers, who write for the black page. But there are not that many Indigenous writers who write for the white page. In fact, I can name them on the fingers of 10 hands. So I said at the beginning of this night that I am an old navigator, and so one of my roles is to maintain a particular position, and that position is often, sometimes contestatory, and often to take the strongest possible oppositional position for theoretical reasons, and also to make sure that people understand that there are still a huge gap to be closed. And while I might look at my own family and see that that gap is being closed by education, that it is being closed by my children having good jobs, that doesn't necessarily say that the Rohingya or that the Wari people in the Amazon have had the same kind of optimistic environment that I have had. So I will stand up for them until the last breath has left my body. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you very much for having me. I'm just so grateful to be here, and good night. Nei whakawhiti tērā, haupane, kaupane, haupane, kaupane, whiti tērā.
Thank you very much, Witi. That was truly impressive and enlightening. Thank you very much for your interest, for your broad interest, I have to say. We are really, really happy. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much, Mr. Hulse. Have a good journey home and have a nice evening. Good night.